Good evening and welcome to Report Card on Trump, the first 100 days here at the Historic Metropolitan AME Church. Let's give the church a big round of applause. This is a live broadcast on SIRIUSXM, Progress 127, Progress Presents, as well as locally, there's none other than WPFW. Let's give it up for WPFW. And we are situated in the historic Frederick Douglass Hall. How appropriate that in this hour of the urgent necessity of struggle that we are in the Frederick Douglass Hall of this historic church. I want to now welcome to the podium our host for this extraordinary event. The Institute of the Black World 21st Century, which is the convener of this event, has partnered with Metropolitan AME Church on a number of very important events. This is a church that is about the people, for the people. It's conscious, it's committed, and its pastor is here to welcome us. Would you please welcome Reverend Dr. Lamar.
Thank you, and welcome to Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church. We are pleased to partner with the Institute of the Black World. We're pleased to host, as we have historically, the kinds of conversations that lead to liberation, that lead to freedom, that lead to the spiritual awakening and awareness that God wants for us and that the ancestors desire for us. We welcome you in the name of our liberating Lord, and we thank you for being here on tonight. I want to just share with you some words with which you are familiar, words from the great divine Henry Highland Garnet, who said, "Let resistance be your motto." But today I want to expand that to say that we not only resist, but we also create. We're here to resist what we know to be imperial, what we know to be evil. And we're here to speak words of life and creativity that in the midst of where we find ourselves, as our people always have, we create a reality that is humane, we create a reality that is just, we create a reality that is beautiful. And so we thank you for being here tonight, and we pray that we will resist and create and leave this space empowered to be different and to do different. Thank you.
Let's give it up for Pastor Reverend William H. Lamar IV. By the way, in some of your programs, I have the third, so there's only 1/4 here, so that's my mistake, not his. We also want to say that we have a hashtag for this evening's program. I have to be reminded of that because I'm one of those ancient Neanderthal people, but we do, it is hashtag IBW Trump Card. Hashtag IBW Trump Card. Let me quickly say that this report card on President Trump, the first 100 days, is a direct follow-up to a town hall meeting we had at the State of the Black World Conference 4 in Newark, New Jersey, November 16th through the 20th. That too was carried live by SiriusXM Progress 127. Our partner, our media partner in the greater New York area was WBAI, because we partner with the Pacifica network wherever we can be. At that town hall meeting, the assessment was the assessment was on the impact of the presidential election that had just occurred on Black America and the Pan-African world. And of course, it was an extraordinary election, so there was a lot to be said, a lot to be assessed and analyzed. But there we said that we would come back. The Institute of the Black World 21st Century and our partners would come back to do an assessment of Trump the first 100 days, a report card. At the town hall meeting in Newark, we said elections matter. There was an urgent need for people of African descent to mobilize and organize, that there ought to be resistance and struggle, but also transformative change in the way that our pastor has just said. So tonight we're delighted to have this conversation and to have two extraordinary moderators join us for this conversation. Neither of them are strangers to this audience. One was raised in this community. Y'all helped raise him at UDC and the Unity Party and Umoja Party, and any number of other things. So y'all claim him as your own. And he's none other than, give it up for Mark Thompson. And I've done so many things with Verna Avery Brown in the past. We've just partnered on so many projects together. It's always a delight to have Verna Avery Brown be on the podium and moderating. Would you please give it up for Verna Avery Brown, because she always knows what's at stake.
Well, thank you, Dr. Daniels. And a special shout out to our WPFW family, 89.3 FM.
Get it right.
Good evening, and we want to take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed panelists right now. We're going to start to my right, your left, Bill Fletcher. Bill Fletcher is the author, a labor and social justice activist, former president of Trans-Africa Forum. Bill Fletcher.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be back home in Washington, D.C. Let me not delay and introduce our panelists. We have a lot to talk about tonight. To my immediate left is one of our leading economists in the country, yes. And she is also the president Emeritus of Bennett College. Please, a warm round of applause for Dr. Julianne Malveaux.
Our next panelist is Jamira Burley, Millennial Vote Director, Hillary Clinton for President campaign. Jamila. Round one.
And then we have two, oh, wait a minute, I'm off order, right? Oh, yeah, here we go. The next person seated to my left, my brother here, former president and CEO of the NAACP, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that some of our statehood friends are here. We had a campaign in 1992 after Alabama Senator Richard Shelby put the death penalty on the ballot. He wanted to institute the death penalty in Washington, D.C. That's how Ben and I met. We organized with a national coalition to abolish the death penalty, to defeat that referendum, and that's how we kept the death penalty out of Washington, D.C. He went on to be an outstanding organizer, nonprofit fundraiser, and of course, as I said, the president and CEO of the NAACP, and he's also thinking about another project. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later on. We won't spill the beans. Ben Jealous, give him a round of applause.
Also, Dr. Elsie Scott is the founding director of the Ronald Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center at Howard University. A warm welcome to Dr. Elsie Scott.
Whenever you initiate, to my left again, a presidential campaign, there are always challenges, especially in the beginning. There are always mishaps, fits and starts. When Bernie Sanders announced his historic run for president last year, and there was some rocky terrain, the very first hire that he made to clean that up was Simone Sanders, and hired her to be his national spokesperson. She is now a regular commentator on CNN, debating and taking on the likes of Jeffrey Lord. And so please welcome Simone Sanders. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you. And Ronald Hampton, he is no stranger to our audience. He is a longtime activist in the Washington, D.C. area. He's also the former executive director of the National Black Police Association, and he has made his voice heard on some critical issues over the years. Ronald Hampton, warm round of applause, please.
And last but not least, my fellow brother, Reverend Lamar, I think we'll all find that this young lady has her own calling. I don't know if she's answered it yet, but we're going to keep helping her discern that, because she'll preach. Am I right? She is the founder and president of the brand new Transformative Justice Coalition, and immediate past president of an organization founded and mandated by President Kennedy, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Please welcome Dr. Barbara Arnwine.
And we just want to remind our panelists that we have a great deal of information to cover this evening, so we want to ask you to keep your responses as crisp and succinct and sort of laser-like, like laser surgery. Go right in there to the pertinent part. So we're going to start with some of the issues that are topping the news today. But first let me say, in sort of a last-ditch effort, some would say a pathetic attempt, really, to curry black votes, then candidate Donald Trump asked the blacks, as he likes to call us, what do you have to lose if you vote for me? Some blacks, 8%, took the bait. And this evening, we're going to explore exactly how African Americans have been impacted thus far under a Trump presidency. And judging from the looks of this esteemed panel, I don't think anybody's going to be judging on the curve or grading on the curve. So let's start with Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Dr. Malveaux, we don't know if Trump is a billionaire or not. He won't reveal his taxes. We know he plays one on TV. But given the makeup of his cabinet, we can assume any tax plan he puts forth will be favorable to the wealthy. The question now is, how will non-corporate America, the people like the average taxpayers, you and I, how will we fare under this new plan? And have you had a chance, he just released it today, have you had a chance to actually eyeball it and see what's in it? And if so, what provisions would you hope are included that would give African American households a clear benefit?
Well, Verna, first of all, thank you, Mark, and of course, Reverend Lamar. We up in your house, the house of Frederick Douglass.
That's right.
Anytime you say Frederick Douglass, we all just got to say amen.
Amen.
And of course, Dr. Ron Daniels, who always leads us to the water. Yeah. We've done this, Ron, I don't know how many times, and the thing that I love about Ron Daniels is that it doesn't matter who the president is. We want to know what's up. You know, it could be Obama, it could be Bush. We want to know what's up. And here's what's up right now. The 2016 campaign was not a victory for 45. And I'm going to ask all y'all to do me a favor. Don't call that man's name. Don't feed ego that has already been fed. Just call him 45. Okay? But in any case, this was not a victory for 45. It was a victory for predatory capitalism. What am I saying then? When power is concentrated, it's possible to extract every little bit of what there is from the smallest of people. So that when you go and look at the first thing that man did was removed a provision in HUD that provided opportunities for people to get relief from private mortgage insurance. This was targeted at nobody but poor people who had to pay if they did not have a 20% down payment for their homes. That's the first thing he did. He hadn't even sat in his chair good before he did that. But then we go through and look at the Labor Department, where with a cut, and I guess I don't have my little piece of paper here, but he's cut everybody. I think he's cut the Labor Department by about 16%. And that 16% means less support for occupational safety and health regulation. That means that people who are victims of wage theft, you know, you work at a big box store, they tell you to punch in at a certain time, right, which is after the time you got there, and punch out and then work some more. So that's going to go away. All the protections of those folks are going to go away. Everything that President Obama did to protect people at the bottom through executive order is going to go away. But Verna, to your tax question, which is a key question, we can't deal with the tax question until we see this man's taxes. Because we don't know if he's hooking himself up or who he's hooking up. But he's hooking somebody up. You know, and he ain't hooking us up. In the last two economic expansions, let's take an economic expansion from the 70s, 1973, economic expansion. At that point, the bottom 80% of people, the bottom 90% gained 56% of the results of the expansion. The top 10% got the other 43%. Well, that wasn't fair, but guess what's happening right now? The top 10% got 115% of the effects of the expansion, and the bottom 90% lost 15%. Let me repeat that so you understand. We have an economic expansion. You hear these economists, they go on CNBC and they say, oh, the economy is doing so well. Who is it doing well for? The top 10% has got 115% of the gain from the expansion, which means they're better off than they ever were. But people who are working every day, everybody in this room, unless you're rich, in which case meet me outside. I got some brothers who are going to relieve you of your wallet. because I need it. But in any case, but people at the bottom, and I'm saying the bottom 80%. I'm not talking about the bottom 10%, the bottom 20%. I'm not talking about the people on public assistance and the people unemployed. I'm talking about us. If you are a teacher, if you are a bus driver, if you work at a university, you have not seen a raise. Or if you saw a raise, it was 2%. And so this is so unbalanced that now he's saying, the good news is that he wants to, of course, streamline the tax code. Everybody wants to do that. The bad news is that he gives you these two little pieces of paper that say, this is what I'm going to do. If I was Congress, I would take him outside. Because essentially, he's putting this back on Congress without details. And so without details, we don't know. The only thing we know, this is what we know for sure. This is what we know for sure. One thing we know for sure. I'm trying to be Oprah today. One thing that we know for sure is that the corporate tax rate will go from 35 to 15. This is what we know. Now, and we don't know nothing else. They're saying that we'll collapse the tax codes for working people to 35, 25, 15. Well, that's about where we are now. Basically, it's about a 3% drop. It's no big deal. But the big drop is going to be with corporate people. Now, this is going to cost us between five, and I know you told me to be short, but I want y'all to hear me because, see, we got smoke and mirrors going on here. So this is going to cost me between 5 and 7, and depending on whose numbers, $1 trillion. Okay, so where is that money going to come from?
You said trillion with a T.
T. Yes. And so where is the money going to come from? So where is it going to come from? So it's going to come from already looking at what we call the skinny budget, and everybody has seen that America's Promise budget that cuts everything except for defense, veterans, and homeland security. When we look at that, we know that education will be cut. Not only will education be cut, but there's going to be more money for charter schools and less money for public schools. We know that labor will be cut. I'm not going to call a roll because I know my esteemed colleagues have all of these other things to say, but what I will say is that if I'm giving out grades, this time 4 years ago, Ron Daniels brought us all together and said, what kind of grade would you give President Obama? And I said an incomplete. Now, what I would give this fool, excuse me.
45, you meant to say 45.
45, that's what thank you. I see, you know what? I get by with the help of my friends. But what I would give this man is an F-. If you could give somebody F-, I mean, these are things as a professor, would someone give you 2 pieces of paper and tell you, this is what I'm gonna do, you would look at him and say, this does not pass a smell test. Nothing that has happened here has passed a smell test, and if you take the list of what he promised and what he's done, even to our detriment, he can't do that.
Mark, Verna, I just like to say, one, Dr. Malveaux is on it, but 2, she kind of sound like Bernie Sanders. You kind of sound like, but to that end and to that point, and to your tax question, what has Donald Trump done? I don't think it's a tax plan. I like to refer to this as a tax outline. Because we don't have any, there's no plan, there's no meat and potatoes to this.
I ain't mad at Bernie Sanders.
You know, look, Bernie was the one saying people are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and they can't make enough money to put food on the table to feed their families. Bernie has been saying that the top 0.1% of people in this country are the only ones getting all the wealth. And we have to start doing things differently or it's not going to change. And now we have 45, who is tripling down on all the things that have happened, not just over the last 8 years, but over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, look, I love President Obama. The first time I could vote, I voted for President Obama. I was in college. President Obama first got elected. But there were some real things that have happened within our economy. You can talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You can talk about permanent, the Trans-Atlantic Partnership, these real trade agreements, things that have benefited corporations and wealthy people in this country. And now you've got a self-described billionaire running America. Self-described, ladies and gentlemen. Self-described billionaire running America. So I think we have to just kind of understand who's in the White House and who's in power before we can even be able to put together a plan on how to combat it. And most folks don't read the numbers. Professional politicos, not like these folks up here on the panel, but, regular everyday people, they're not reading the numbers and they don't know. So I think it is incumbent upon all of us, and that's why we have great folks like Verna and Mark and people like WPFW.
Well, and sometimes Bernie Sanders sounds like Dr. Malveaux.
I'll say that, yeah.
You know what? I know that I have had more than my share of time at the mic, but I just need to say one really quick thing because we need to understand it.
Okay,
We need to understand this. Whether we were dealing with a 45 or a Hillary, the structural conditions for African American people were aberrant in the first place.
Well, they ain't want to hear that.
We need to be clear. Whether we had 45 or Hillary,
Yes.
we have an income ratio of 60%. We have a wealth ratio. Black folks have 7% of the wealth of white folks. A black single mother has cash of $750. $750 compared to about $5,000 and change for a white single mother. Listen, I'm not going to go all down the list, but I just want to say, because we don't want to, let's not do a thing about 45 being the devil. Predatory capitalism is a devil, and 45 is wearing horns.
Okay,
All right.
Dr. Julianne.
Dr. Julianne Malveaux and Simone Sanders we heard from. And this will not, and Ben too, this is not the end of this conversation, because we're going to go around some of these issues, and I don't know whether Dr. Daniels mentioned or not, I may have missed it, but at some point you all, well, you should have in your chair the cards for your questions. Did you mention that? So they have the cards, so you can start formulating your questions for a little bit later on. We'll talk about that some more, as well as get some of your questions. Just one thing I want to share on that subject of economics, Obama's former chair of the Council on Economic Advisors, Austin Goolsbee, tweeted this today, that the Trump tax plan has a corporate tax rate now that goes down to 15%.
Yes, she mentioned that.
The tax rate for a single person making $38,000 a year is 25% plus the payroll tax. So all of the people who voted for him are going to get hit pretty hard. But we're going to come back to that.
More taxes than they will be,
Right, they're going to get hit pretty hard.
basically.
So, and the next issue I want to move to, and again, we'll do a round robin on a lot of these, is the other very prevalent issue in the news now that really deals with his first 100 days in foreign policy. Now, many people have anxiety. My son, who's 14, is in fear of being drafted to go to war at 14 years old. And he asks me about it every day. And he asked me if I was too old to be drafted.
What did you tell him?
No, I'm
You can
not
call
too.
Uncle Bell and I'll tell him exactly how old Dad is.
No, well, we're not going to do that either. But North Korea is in the news, and last night he gave this crazy interview. He gives all crazy interviews, but major conflict. The Bill Fletcher Jr., with your expertise in foreign policy, what is your assessment of Donald Trump's foreign policy for the past 100 days, but particularly the crisis in North Korea? The other news in the past 24 hours, Jimmy Carter at 95 has offered to broker a peace agreement with the North Korean dictatorship. They seem interested. The Trump administration said they don't want Jimmy Carter involved. But of course not. But Bill Fletcher Jr., your reaction to Trump's 100 days in terms of foreign policy and this immediate crisis in North Korea.
But first, are we at war yet? Because you have to really stay plugged into the news every minute with the 45 in office, because he is so temperamental and erratic. We could very well be at war while we're sitting in this room
I'm going to
right
say that
now.
I failed to mention. In the past few hours, North Korea did make another test, and it failed. So they've had another failed test since we've been here today. But go ahead, Bill. What are your, please?
Well, thank you also for inviting me. So first, Trump knows nothing about the world and less about war. And so that is what makes this very, very dangerous. He has no real interest in the rest of the world, and he likes to portray the United States as being the victim of other people's actions, and therefore plays to his xenophobia. The problem in North Korea is that it's sort of like the saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't out to get you. The leadership in North Korea is very paranoid, and part of that is because nuclear weapons on the part of the United States were on the Korean Peninsula for years. The U.S. was very provocative with North Korea, and there was immense fear because North Korea was completely obliterated during the Korean War. There was an immense fear that the United States was going to attempt something. This is one of those things that we don't hear in the news, we don't hear in much of our history. And so you look at the craziness of the current leadership of North Korea out of any kind of context. And it just appears that they simply have lost their minds. What North Korea is looking for is a peace treaty. They've actually been very consistent about that for years. The Korean War ended in 1953 with an armistice. It did not end with a treaty. It ended with a cessation of hostilities. That was it. There was no agreement beyond that other than the establishment of a new demilitarized zone. The Korean governments, ever since then, have been looking for a peace treaty, and the United States has been the obstacle to a peace treaty. The Koreans have asked for direct negotiations with the United States, and the United States, under different administrations, has repeatedly opposed that. And so now you have the situation where the North Korean administration or government is being very provocative. They tend to do this periodically. It's sort of like we want to remind everybody that we're still here, and therefore what we're going to do is keep upping the ante. But when you have a situation where you have a leader in North Korea who is young and unstable, and you have a leader in the United States who is old and unstable, the situation is incredibly delicate, where there could simply be a mistake. And I don't mean that, I mean literally there could be a mistake, that someone hears something and hits a button and that's it. And what has so far stopped hostilities from going further is what the Washington Post reported, which is that Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, or otherwise known as South Korea, is within artillery range of North Koreans. And the North Koreans are not using mortars. They're using very heavy artillery. And so we could be talking about the deaths of thousands, if not the vaporization of Seoul. So the situation is so dangerous. Every morning when I wake up, I immediately go to determine, I look in the news to see, are we yet at war? And I don't think that that's an exaggeration of what it is that we're facing. And because of this, the efforts on the part of someone like former President Carter must be applauded, and must be not just applauded but supported. We need to be building a movement that is saying that there needs to be peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. And that means that there must be a treaty. Now, the only good news that I've heard recently is the Secretary of State saying that he is prepared, or the administration is prepared, to have direct talks with North Korea. If they follow through on that, that will actually be an advance. The only way it will happen, however, is if we create the conditions.
So, Bill, I gave Trump, well, he has charged that there may be a, quote, major conflict with North Korea. I think he made that statement either yesterday or today.
That's correct.
And I give him an A+ on saber rattling and bellicose threats and unconstitutional bombings. But what would you give him in terms of a grade on diplomacy and strategy?
I would give him an Oscar for performing just as well as General Jack D. Ripper in Dr. Strangelove. I think that when you look at Dr. Strangelove, and for those of you that are too young to remember Dr. Strangelove, there's a major character, General Jack D. Ripper, and every time I think about the policies of this administration, I would say that he is absolutely mirroring the policies of that individual. And for those of you that have not seen the movie, I'm just going to leave you to guess.
Thank you, Bill Fletcher.